If everything went to plan, this should be the second video coming out in the Duster kind of rebuild series here. I wanted to kick it off with the header building video because I think that was kind of a little more exciting and something that I've been excited to do. Obviously, as you can see, they're not complete yet because I'm filming this in advance. But we're gonna backtrack a little bit. I'm gonna show you guys some of the work that I'm doing ahead of time. I've been working on this the past few days since I rolled the car in here, going through, and I cleaned up, or shouldn't even really say cleaned up, just kind of rerouted the wiring harness, the main harness that comes up for main power, and then all my front accessories. I have a fuse box on the front is there. I got the relays for the fans, and because I had a different radiator set up, a different overflow setup, and I had to remount those two electrical components because of that last year, I ended up having a bunch of different holes in this front core support just from changing all that stuff. There's a bunch of factory holes as well. So I went through, made sure everything was mounted where I wanted it to be. I'll show you guys that once the time comes for reinstallation. But once I got everything mounted where I wanted it to be for sure, went through, marked out those holes that I needed to keep, went through and welded up everything else. Probably welded up, I don't know, probably like 7, 8 different holes on this side and probably double that on this side here. A couple across this top brace, like I said, just kind of factory holes and markings. So it'll all be nice and clean once it's all set and done. I still got some hammer and dolly work to do, and then obviously I'll be going through and repainting this engine bay. I got some other things to clean up, like make some plates for those holes as well, clean up some stuff down there. Basically, you know, now that I have a lot more practice with metalwork and fabricating a lot of stuff, at least more than I did 2 years ago when originally did this swap here, I'm gonna go through, take some time and put that to use here. The last few pieces that I have to do on the core support will be these circles that I just cut out. You can see there is one right there. That was a factory hole for something, I'm not totally sure. So I'm gonna go through, weld in a piece right there. And then you can see there are 3 on this lower radiator support, bottom half of the core support here. So I'm gonna go through, I'm gonna weld those 3 up, and then you can see there's this divot with this square right there, and that used to be for the factory came member. There was a brace that went off the front, but since I got this QA1 tubular one up front, obviously I don't need that anymore. So I'm gonna go through, probably just splice that in half, hammer and dolly that. I'll have to weld up the center. So that'll look all one piece on the bottom. I'm probably gonna go through and just toss some dimples in this. I think that'll look pretty nice. And then I gotta go through, hammer and dolly that full piece right there, hammer and dolly this lip right here because that's all bent out of shape. But other than that, once I can get that all wrapped up, that should be it for metalwork on the front. It's just a lot of tedious work. It's not the most exciting, if I'm being completely honest, but I think it'll be pretty nice once it's all said and done. Finished up all the fab work on the front core support and kind of bottom radiator support as well. So all the holes that I need to be welded up are welded up. I went through and welded up those bigger holes that I had to make circles for. There was 1 right there. There was 3 on the bottom of this. Went through, punched some dimple dies in this, hammered and dollied it the best I could. This part was just twisted up a bunch from being in service over the years and being one of the lowest points, especially on the front of the vehicle. So it's not 100% perfect. I'm happy with it though. It's a lot better. This car is a driver. It is not going to be, you know, the Charger, so it doesn't need to be at that level of work necessarily, but I'm pretty happy with it. I also went through and hammer and dolly to that edge right there, so that's straight. Same with this top edge here. So pretty happy with how that's all turned out there. Obviously everything is masked off right now. I'm gonna go through and prime all the bare spots on the front of the core support and paint that black, and then I'm going to go ahead and do a undercoating on it. The undercoating is the same that I used for everything in here and underneath the car. I like it because it's not super textured, but it's enough where it'll hold up, because obviously the front of this is going to get bashed with rain and dirt and stuff like that. So I think it'll just be nice, make it all one solid color, something that'll hold up over time. Gonna go through, spray that, and then when I go through to do the rest of the engine bay and weld up a bunch of other stuff, clean that up a little bit as well, I'll go through and do all the body work for these spots and the other spots that were on the sides of the core support as well. As you guys can see, I am in an absolute mess right now. I don't enjoy body work, but it needs to get done. I'm replacing the driver's side fender on the Duster here, so I'll do a walk around once I get the car outside, but this fender is pretty rough. It's wavy pretty much from the start all the way back until where it meets up with the door, and it's filled with Bondo. I've never really liked it, especially once the sun hits it. You can really see like all these creases, and I don't know, never really been a huge fan of it. So I found this one, solid $200 score on Marketplace. Had to go dig it out of some guy's barn, and this was the best Duster fender he had. So been looking for one for a while, just never really found one. Like I said, found this one, ended up being a pretty decent deal. It's not horrible. There's a couple things that need to be addressed. A couple spots I had to go through and weld up. The fender is not perfect. Obviously, the body on this car isn't perfect. There's no more rust. Went through and replaced all that. But as you can see, I mean, things are, you know, bent up. Body lines aren't, you know, perfectly straight. Gaps aren't perfectly straight. Once again, it's a driver. This is not a Charger level car. So I'm trying my best to not get ahead of myself and go through and make this fender absolutely perfect, because I just don't want one perfect panel on there, obviously. Just doing some minor stuff. I went through and made a basically side marker delete plate, because this is a 70 or 71 fender, so I had a much larger side marker on it, whereas the 72s basically had a little square for the wiring harness, and then they kind of had these side markers that stick out on the side. I got rid of that and made these block off plates, NASCAR style ones. I wanted to transfer the one on the driver's side there to the new fender. So in order to do that, I had to make a block off plate for that right there to fill the larger hole, because as you can see, it's a lot larger than the little plate I have. Anyway, all of that kind of brings me back to what I wanted to point out in this video, and that is I've been sanding on the rear here, and notice something. The closer we get, you can see there's actually orange on the rear, and I did some digging in some other spots as well, and there's not a whole lot. There's a couple signs of orange on this fender throughout it, but it was stripped at one point, and this green I'm pretty sure is just a primer, because it is on there very thin. Someone was in the process of doing some body work, because I went through and wire wheeled a couple areas, and there was a ton of Bondo, a couple small holes, like all that stuff I had to go through and weld up. But anyway, at some point this fender was orange, and that's actually kind of cool to see. It's a shame I couldn't find one with similar or matching patina, but that's all right. I've always wanted to do a black fender on this, so I'm gonna go ahead, make this one satin black. It'll match the hood, and then for the stripe on it, I'm gonna go through and do a white stripe, so it'll be the same design as the stripe that's on the car, but it'll just be a continuation on a white stripe. Some people won't like it. I think it'll give it a cool look. I'm gonna keep the other fender, so if I ever just wanna switch it back, I can do just that without a problem. That one's just not worth the time to go through and try to save it. And once again, I'll show you guys that once I take it off, because it's pretty rough. Headers are complete. We're back in real time. I got the front end back together on the car. The only things that I had to go and realistically change or make were these little brackets right here. So you can see that guy and that guy. And that is because I removed the front brace / hood latch support. I always kind of want it to be an open look, especially when the radiator is right there. I think it'll look pretty cool. You can see the aluminum radiator. There's no bar I got hood pins, so there's no need for the hood latch. It'll bolt right back on if I do decide to do that in the future, and that is why I left the 2 holes on the lower core support for that. I'll just have to make a bracket for this piece here because that support did basically hold this up here. So I'll have to make a little bracket or maybe even just tack weld it to the bottom side of the core support. I haven't fully decided yet, but that is all back on. Headers are done. And before I can take this engine out, the last thing I'm gonna have to do is go through and build new motor mounts for this. I built these mounts when I did the K-member and front end conversion. I'm not happy with them, especially not happy with this side. I was in a rush to get it done in about 2 to 3 weeks, and this was kind of a last minute thing. They're not the best. I knew that, and now that I have a new design, I'm gonna go ahead and just fully cut these out. We're gonna start over, and I think it should be a lot better strength-wise, but also look a lot better as well. This is a very basic drawing of my plan for the motor mounts. So I got a adjustable plate on the block, which basically allows you to slide the mount forward or back wherever you want it to be. So that'll stay on the block, and then I'll have to go through and basically make a rectangle plate that'll bolt up to that. And then I'll have some bushings right here, which are these guys. So I'll have to make some notches with basically some triangle tabs off to mount to the plate. And then this will all be part of the block essentially, which is this configuration right here. Going to the K-member will be this kind of crazy design. Obviously the K-member is just some square tubing. So I haven't decided if I'm gonna notch it to put an angle plate on it, or if I'm just gonna set the angle plate on top and then build a tab to support it. I'm thinking that's what I'm gonna end up doing strength-wise. And then off of that plate, which will be on an angle like this, I'll have these 2 braces, which will come up, basically go to this clamshell piece, and then obviously the motor mount that's on the block will slide into it just like that with a bolt going through it all. So quick rundown of all the materials I'm gonna be using. These are just some generic bushings you can get off Summit. Obviously there's an 1 3/4 inch outer diameter, and then they have a 9/16 bolt going through them. So pretty basic, nothing too crazy. All the plates that I'm gonna be doing is all gonna be 1/8 inch. So that plate and then this plate will be 1/8 inch. And then the actual mount part of this will be this tubing right here, which I got 1.5 inch outer diameter. It's 0.95 wall. I would have preferred a 120 wall, but I could not find a 120 wall with 1.5 inch outer diameter. So that'll have to work. It should be plenty strong. I'm not too worried about it. And then obviously if I have them both going on a triangle like this, there's not gonna be enough space on this mount. So they're gonna be staggered. One will basically like be here, the other one will be here. They'll be on different angles. And that'll really help on the driver's side because I have the power steering lines going into the rack right there. So if I stagger them perfectly, it should give me enough space to be able to clear that. I can get the lines on and off under this motor mount. It's not the easiest, but it is possible. That's how I got them on. But this way I have a little bit more space. It'll be a little bit easier, a little more serviceable. So I'm gonna be happy with that once it's all said and done. And then the final piece is the actual clamshell, if you wanna call it that, which will be the part the bolt goes through, obviously. So that's what this tubing comes into play for. This is 1 3/4 inch, and I'll probably split this halfway down the center, and then I'm probably gonna have to take some material off. So basically just use a little top section of this, but that is going to wrap around this right here, which you can kind of see right there. And then I'm gonna have to make some side plates, drill some holes in it for the bolt to go through, and knock it all out. It makes sense up here, and I've seen some other motor mounts kind of this style. It should be, like I said, a lot stronger, which is what I really want. I want very minimal flex. The only flex I want on these motor mounts is on the rubber bushing part, considering how close all the tolerances are in the rest of the engine bay now. So go ahead, get the engine braced up on the fenders, cut the old mounts off, and I'm gonna start by making the plates that go up to the block, make the little tabs that'll go into the bushings, get that all mounted, and then we can start doing the tube work. Driver's side motor mount is completely cut off, and I got the cam member and frame rail prepped. It was a lot of work to cut that very carefully, not hit anything, cut anything I'm not supposed to, or dig into the cam member rail or the frame rail. So I'm pretty happy with it. Did a pretty good job. I may have to take some more paint off the cam member depending on where the motor mounts will actually land, but we'll have to see. Everything is off the block as well, and I got all the pieces cut out for the motor mounts here. So went through, made some pretty simple basic templates. This mimics the shape of the adapter plate right here, and then these holes will be to actually mount the adapter plate to the engine. So it uses these countersunk bolts, which is nice because then my plate I made would just sit obviously right on top of that. If I was smart, I would have just drawn these pieces up in Fusion and sent them out to Suncut to get cut, but that would have taken 5-6 days and only took me, I don't know, maybe an hour or two to trace this all and get them cut out. So I'm happy with that because I was able to obviously go through and weld up this one here, welding it while it is bolted down to this adapter plate to prevent any warping or anything like that. So I'm pretty happy with it. I wish I could have been able to weld more on the inside of these tabs here, but that's as far in as I could go with the torch. So I got that on that side there. Same thing on all 4 sides. It's fully welded on the ends here, and then I did go through and obviously weld these tabs to the tube while it wasn't welded to this plate. So everything on the inside of that is welded. I'm gonna leave this one on here for a while and let it fully cool off. So while that is cooling off, I'm gonna go through and do side number 2 here, get these tabs measured out, marked, welded on, and then probably have to just let this one cool overnight. It is still extremely hot, and I welded it about 45 minutes ago. So once that's done, I'll measure, do this side tomorrow probably, get the bushings in, can mount these to the block, and then once they're mounted on the block, start measuring and figuring out how I want to run the actual tubes for the mount, and we'll see what goes from there. Little update on the motor mount progress. Making some good progress, just all these little pieces are taking a lot of time, especially once I combine them together. But both mounts that are going to be on the engine are done. I went through and made these clamshell pieces this morning. So I took some 1 3/4 tube, and then I made these side pieces. Bushings go inside just like so. Bolt goes through. You can see it sitting on this side here, and I'm thinking this is a position it's going to be at. I can rotate it up or down kind of depending on where the tubes are going to land, but I liked this spot right here. I think that'll work out pretty decent. So I'm happy with the way they turned out. This will obviously be for the passenger side here once I get to that. But now I'm moving on to the part that needs to go into the K member, and this should be the last of the plates I have to cut out. I'm not enjoying cutting all these plates by hand, but we're almost done. Then on to the tube work. Working on the tube parts for the motor mounts now, and it's definitely been tricky, but I think I've come up with a pretty neat or cool solution to get these tubes notched and to get them notched pretty precisely. There's like 15 different ways you can do this. The ideal way would be having like I don't even know, basically it's a tool that's the shape of the tube. It's the outer diameter, and it can go over whatever. You press it down, it indents on the correct radius or notch. Take that, put it over the tube that you need to notch, trace it out, bada bing, bada boom. This right here is essentially the cheaper slash when you don't have the right tool, you make the right tool version. I cut off a little section of the tubing that I'm using, just a small piece, and I went through and notched it where I need it to be notched, got everything correct. I already have the rear bar on the driver's side in place, so you can see that one is tacked in there. I had to do a pretty intricate notch for the radius on there, and then just a flat piece, of course, going on that right there. But this front one gets a little bit tricky because these two tubes needs to kind of interlock. That's what this notch here is. Once I got everything notched, I just kind of eyeball it, mock it up, Sharpie, you know, grind a little here, grind a little there type deal. I'll go through and just wrap some tape around it, take a razor blade, trim it as precise as I can, do the same thing on both sides, and then I just took a ruler and basically drew a line between these two, that way they line up. I'll go through, I'll carefully peel the tape off both ends, and then I'll cut a new section of my tubing there to the correct length. Tape on that, go through, trim it out. But obviously this piece is going to be a little too short, and you need that in order to get this notch and make sure that's right, because obviously if it was longer, you'd have no idea what this angle needs to be on this side here. So trim it short, and then I just add whatever the difference was, which was 7/8. So when I go to mock this up, I need to add 7/8 from this here, and that end should line up perfectly with that base plate I made. Just like that, pretty simple. Got it all prepped. Kept the same center line, that way you can just measure from the top of this point to basically the bottom of that point. So if that's our line right there, and that's the line right there, this was 5 1/8, add 7/8, we got 6 inches from top to bottom. So perfect. Go through, trim this one out, see how close we were, and get this one tacked in place. Side number 1 is fully complete. The only thing left I have to do is just weld the base of the bracket to the K-member. I was going to do that while it's in the car here, but those are some pretty important welds and need to be 100% correct, and I would rather do that once the engine is out. I might end up dropping the K-member. I wasn't planning on doing it originally. Haven't decided if I'm still going to, but we'll see. So I got them tacked in pretty good. I also ended up adding an X brace on the back side of the base plate, so you can kind of see where the welds are right there, but there's an 1/8 inch plate on the back that does an X, and then I have this piece right here which goes straight down to the K-member, and then I have one on the bottom side as well. I figured having 4 points of contact all the way around was better than just one on this side and one on that side. This one is done. The engine is resting on that, along with the little brace here. I got this side just cut out, the K-member prepped. I got the motor mount bolted to the block there. So now it's time to start templating and measuring this side to make it match this side here. The angles of the tubes are probably going to be a little bit different and a little bit shorter, but other than that, it's pretty much copy and paste. So I'm going to time lapse the whole process and see how long it takes to knock out this side. Passenger side motor mount is fully welded up and just tacked to the K-member, so same place that the driver's side motor mount is at now. This side obviously had to be a little bit shorter, and I had to slide the angle of this plate down more on the K-member. I wanted them to be symmetrical, but the way that this kind of clamshell piece needed to be on, if it was rotated up anymore, the motor mount wouldn't be able to drop down in it when the engine is being set down. So that's the last thing I wanted to happen. The angle of it ended up turning out pretty good. It doesn't look horrible, so I'm happy with it. Once again, once I pull the engine, and I'm probably gonna drop the K-member now, I'll go through and fully weld up the base plate to the K-member. So do the same thing on this side. Other than that, I got a couple small beads on there. They're tacked in multiple spots, so should be good for the time being. I'm pretty happy with the result on those. That's the first like real tube project I've done for like anything chassis or suspension related components. So pretty stoked to be doing things like that now. These look 10 times better than the last ones, obviously, and they should be a lot stronger. Shouldn't be any flex in these. So the next step now is pulling the engine and trans out. Once that's out, welding up the motor mounts. Probably gonna end up just dropping the whole front suspension. It'll be easier. Then I gotta go through, finish welding up some stuff in the engine bay, making that all smooth. You can see there's a couple of things I want to do to that. Body work it, prime, paint the motor mounts, put the front suspension back in, and then we should be able to drop the new engine and trans in. So as of right now, I think there's like 36 days until power tour, and the headers and the motor mounts were like the two biggest like engineering design figured out pieces. Working on the engine bay and body work, that's just mindless work at this point. It's going to take time, but it's nothing necessarily new. So I feel fairly confident I can get that knocked out. And as of right now, next weekend is when the engine and trans are going to be dropped off. So I got 7 days to get this engine out, which I'm going to try to do tonight here if I don't fall asleep beforehand. And then go through, do everything else to the engine bay. So a lot of work, but we're making good progress. I feel fairly confident in it. Once the new engine and trans is in, I will be feeling pretty good, and it'll just be a nice sigh of relief once we get to that point. So other than that, gotta stop talking, keep rocking and rolling, but just standing back looking at these, pretty happy with it. Pretty happy with the way that the front end all came together here, and it's just another step towards completion and having this thing running and driving again.